Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Scheming, the Place North podcast that gives property folk a platform to talk about three schemes they think about a lot. I'm your host, Dan Whelan, Deputy Editor of Place Northwest. Today, I'm in Leeds, speaking to a developer earning praise from admirers near and far for its approach to housing development. Joining me today to talk about the three schemes that he thinks about the most is Jonathan Wilson, co-owner and managing director at Citu. Jonathan, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much.
So, we're going to speak about this particular scheme shortly, but we are currently sat in the show home in the Climate Innovation District in Leeds. It's a beautiful sunny day outside. We couldn't have picked a better day to come here, and it is beautiful. And as I mentioned in my intro, you're earning a lot of admirers. Why do you think that is?
That's a very kind thing to say. I think we've been on a really interesting, exciting and really tough journey of vertical integration as a business in the last 10 years. And whilst doing that, alongside that, we've been absolutely ruthless to our purpose. We've been ruthless to the vision. And perhaps if you were to go back 5-10 years, we were seen very much as some guys who've got some great ideas. I think where we sit today, and as you say in the show home of one of our flagship developments, we're showing it can be done. So we've proven the model. So we're in a really exciting point, and I think we've got a long way to go, and we love that. And I think the plaudits, they're great, but actually we certainly won't be stopping there.
Absolutely, well said. For a lot of our listeners will be based in the Northwest, and they might not come over this side of the Pennines very often. And obviously you're based here and you're working here and you're working in Sheffield. So just tell our listeners, for those who don't know, a bit about Citu, because you mentioned there about the vertical integration, which is a key part of who you are, isn't it? So tell us a bit more about the business.
Sure. I have to start every explanation about Citu with its probably leading and most important part, which is our purpose. We set out on a really responsible journey about how we can create the most impactful places that are really planetary focused, how we can do things that are sustainable, that are challenging the status quo in our industry in quite a dramatic way. And how we do that by in hand creating some of the most interesting, joyful and happy places for people to live. It would be amiss of me to not mention that the way in which we go about that means that there are much easier ways of doing things. We have to pave our own tracks on almost every occasion, whether that's from the technical aspects of planning, design, all the way through to how we set up our projects. And to do that, it means that we have to be absolutely underpinned by an amazing group of people. So our culture and our people at Citu, they're the tool that makes this all happen. And it's a super important part of why we exist. And I must always celebrate those people who have joined us on a really tricky journey. The vertical integration side of Citu means that over the last 10 years we've pieced together, we do design from early vision design all the way through to the technical aspects of it. We've got a factory here on site at the Climate Innovation District that I'm sure we'll come on to, where we build timber frame, closed panel systems that are to passive house standards, and we only build for ourselves. So slightly different to the world of MMC that has seen certainly some turbulence over the past couple of years. Our journey was all about how we maintain control. So we build only for ourselves. And then we deliver on site as well. So we've ended up with an element of control end to end that's super important to deliver against that purpose.
That is fascinating. And you mentioned there that it works for you and it's true to your purpose, but it's perhaps not the easiest way to go about things. So is that why, when you're talking about challenging the status quo in terms of design and sustainability, is that why we're not seeing it more because it's too difficult, essentially?
I think in short, I think yes. When looking back, particularly in the last 10, 11 years of our vertical integration, there are some aspects of that I look back and think, wow, that was a huge risk. That will have made no sense on an appraisal. That may have made no sense in terms of the resource and perhaps even some of the skills that we had at that moment in time. But I think the reason that it's worked is because the purpose was so powerful, the vision was so clear and still is, and those two still exist, only to have been developed on over those 11 years. But I think the final point that I think is super important is we've only ever done things for the right reasons. And I think those right reasons are intertwined with, of course, the purpose and just doing the right things for places and for cities. And when we get asked the question all the time, why is the rest of the industry not doing this? And I try and avoid that question as best I can, because one, I don't want to make excuses, because there's a lot of things we're doing that need to be done. We're in a climate catastrophe and we need to be doing things differently. So I try and avoid making excuses for others and why they're not doing it. But I think also hand in hand with that is we're really proud to be creating a ripple effect in our industry and saying, actually, you can do this, you can do it at scale, and you can do it that creates great outcomes. And of course, you can do it so it's financially and commercially viable.
And that's key, isn't it? You're not a charity, you're a property business that you want to make a profit like everyone else. You're just doing it in a different way.
Absolutely, and that's where the necessity of taking those early risks and ultimately setting up a trading business that is funded by the outcome of the development. That's where those two sit hand in hand. By creating a vertically integrated model, it means that we're able to go back to first principles of how to do things really well, how to scale things to a level of excellence, and whilst doing so, working out where you can save money, time, resource, waste, carbon along every single 1% of that journey. By doing so, it means that we can create products like the one we're sat in today that are completely industry facing when it comes to cost.
Yeah, and you're in control, and that's one of the key things, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I mentioned the admirers. You've actually, one of your schemes has been mentioned on the Scheming podcast before. So series 1, Howard Lord, who's managing director of Cert Property, mentioned his scheme that he wished he'd been involved in was Kelham Island,
yes,
in Sheffield, which must have been nice to hear.
Yeah, it was some super kind words, and I listened to the podcast, and I think in that podcast itself, I think yourself and Howard hit the nail on the head with a lot of the points. It's about it is different, but it is scalable, and I think it is a lot of what we do is transferable. Those small moments of acknowledgement from other developers are super important to us, because it tells us that we're doing the right things within the industries that we're working in. So it was a nice moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, as you know, on today's podcast, I'm going to ask you about 3 schemes. So they are the one you're most proud of, the one that you wish you had done, and the dream scheme. So without any further ado, let's get started. So, Jonathan, the one you're most proud of, I think I might know what you're going to say here, but tell us about the one that you're most proud of, please.
Well, the scheme I'm most proud of is the Climate Innovation District where we're sat. That wasn't an easy decision for me to make for today, purely on the basis of little Kelham and Kelham Island that we've delivered in Sheffield have a huge part of my heart and my head. I think the Climate Innovation District, it just topped it for me, purely on the basis that I'm from Leeds.
Right.
I studied architecture here in Leeds, and I feel that extra sense of responsibility, I guess.
Okay.
So
tell us a bit about it. Tell us, because I wish I could describe what I can see out the window. I'll try. So there's kind of modular townhouses either side of a river which cuts through. There's a bar here as well. There's beautiful landscape gardens. But tell us where we are in relation to the city centre and sort of how this scheme came about and where we're up to.
I always just sort of recoil to the initial vision for this place. Quite a wordy title, the Climate Innovation District, but 10 years ago when we were planning the district and it was very much on paper, we realised we needed to set that ambition to take us from a great vision to the reality and have a name that held us to account, our teams to account, and any stakeholders to account. So it had to be climate facing. How do we really create a place at scale? There's 1,000 homes here at the district on completion that is climate resilient and focused. Make sure that we layer innovation into that. Now, innovation, I think, often gets lost in the industry as being about tech, or being about new. For me, innovation is sometimes about reflecting on the past, looking at some of those great examples of how we've planned some of the most successful places, and the Victorians arguably did a lot of that incredibly well. So we've picked up on some of those elements of innovation. And then, of course, the element of this being a district, and we all know the 15-minute neighbourhoods, cities, etc., have been prevalent within our world in the last 5 years. But that was very much those principles were what were leading us here. I think so setting out with that level of ambition. This was a brownfields. It was an ex-oil refinery. Then it was a go-kart track we're currently sat on. And it was a forgotten bit of Leeds. There was talk of this amazing opportunity, the Leeds South Bank, and we took the bit that was perhaps slightly on the edge, although still in the city centre boundary. We're only a 15-minute walk from the train station, and we've got actually some great amenities already here on site over at Leeds Dock. So we set out on a journey. I once got trapped in a lift with another developer who asked us if we're still doing that green stuff down the river.
Are you going to name names?
No, I daren't. But that was about 8 years ago, and it was seen very much as this very niche ideology of what a great place could look like. Fast forwarding, I guess, to where we are today is we've really proven that we've got a really great community that live here. And the reason that I'm so proud of it is heavily and almost linked down to the way in which people respond here.
Okay.
Whether that's people coming for the first time like yourselves today, or it's the people who've been here from day one, seeing how those people are responding to the very different ways of placemaking. Overused word, I know, but
this is the thing. It is an overused word, but this actually feels like it. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here. I was thinking, walking through when we were walking towards the show home from the factory over there, that if you walked through a new build estate, you wouldn't feel anything. And even a lot of the new sort of high-rise developments in the north or wherever else, you wouldn't really feel anything. But when you're here, you look around and you actually think, oh wow, this is different. And I think that's, I mean, it shows that you've done something right, I guess.
No, I appreciate that feedback, and that's again, always super important. The design principles that I think really enable that type of feeling is that you'll see that we have no cars on the landscape. We hide all the cars in beneath ground, and by doing so, that opens up a wealth of opportunity. You think about the traditional home that we see in the UK, particularly, is that you have your house, you've got a 2.4 metre barrier that sits around you, and you have this massive object being the car that sits outside the front of your outside your front door. that then defines how you live. It means that you jump in the car to nip round the corner. It means you don't get to know your neighbour, and you end up in a sense of where the word fence came from, defence, and this is mine, and I'm going to actually be aggravated by what goes on outside of it. Going back to the Victorians, we took some of their the way in which they used to plan great places, and you remove the fence, you get to know your neighbour, you get to understand the community you live in and what support you can give it and it can give you back. And that's different variations depending on who you are and what you need. We remove the car from landscape and you create opportunities for play, for growing, and different levels of amenity. And I personally live here on the district.
Oh, really? Okay.
Myself and my co-owner, director, Chris, we both live here. And we moved in here very early on to really get an understanding of how this was going to work. This was exemplar in its vision, but to really make sure that it delivered, we both moved on site. We've stayed. We love it here. Our families love it here, and it's enabled us to see the good, which is super important. It's enabled us to acknowledge when things aren't working and jump on it straight away and fix it. And as an architect and designer, and I've thoroughly loved living here by seeing both the good and the bad, because it means that we can take all those learnings and make sure we progress for Citu and also the community in the most dynamic way and take all those learnings forward. So yeah, I think one interesting point I think is very much relevant is that when we were early on in this project, we saw the pandemic hit us, and all those principles about actually cars not that important, actually your neighbours are super important, actually your amenities are. We saw all those really important aspects of a great place accelerate to everyone understanding them sort of very quickly. And yeah, as I say, I was living on site at that time and took a load of learnings as that developed. Where we are today is that the district is approximately a third way through. We've got a super exciting second phase going on, as you said, over the river. I'm very tempted at the moment to move myself over the river, and
surely you can do that whenever you want.
Yeah, I've got to be the last one in the queue.
Right. Okay.
But it's the reason I'm just really keen to see all different aspects of this place as it grows.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you finally on this about density. So what is the density here? Because, it's a brownfield site on the fringe of the city centre. Is there an argument that with 1.5 million housing target and growing population, that this site should have included, a taller element, a couple of skyscrapers maybe?
Often we sit in different forums where we'll get challenged on this or asked the question, and I think we've got a model that's called what we call medium density. The traditional house builders we're building per acre about 5 times what the traditional house builder will put on in terms of units. I think then there's the argument about, well, we can go really tall and big. The negative and scary impacts I think that has on the spaces between buildings and how it feels on the ground actually kills value. And so we've tried to really balance the two to say, actually, if we we've got our streets are 10 meters apart. That was quite a hard thing in the early days to try and get that through to the planners in a way in which they could understand it. And we had to spend a lot of time articulating the visions through great European models of regeneration. But by creating those tight streets, because you remove the car, you then create great communities, and you then also really define what the amenity spaces are doing. So in terms of the sort of financial model, we've made it work by really intensifying the streets and making sure the spaces between the buildings are so amazing that actually you can maintain and capture a good value that makes the model work. But it all goes back to that point of remove the car, and the opportunities in terms of the commercial opportunities as well as the social and human opportunities. They're plentiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love to speak about this scheme all day, to be honest, but let's move on. So the second scheme we're going to talk about today is the one that got away. So two ways of interpreting this one. So this could be a project you were involved in but that never came to fruition, or one that you were not involved in but that you admire and would love to say was one of yours. So what have you chosen for this one?
Yeah, I again had to think long and hard about this one. But actually when after thinking long and hard, I recall back to the one that stuck out straight away. So I've taken the question as one that I have huge amount of admiration for, which is Borneo Sporenberg, just outside of Amsterdam. Borneo and Sporenberg, when I went, I actually went there on a study trip in my first year of university. Okay. I went there with a blissful naivety that this was the blueprint for a place. Okay. And I went there at the point where it was still in development, but in the heart of Borneo was 100 homes that were designed by 100, had a blueprint for 100 different architects to design within the parameters of height, scale, but they could do whatever they wanted internally with the facade. That stuck with me all the way through through my whole career, in terms of the architecture, but more importantly about how they treated streets. And it wasn't till slightly later on in my own career path and journey where I realized actually that was something really special. And I spend every summer and every opportunity I have going to see different examples of great development across predominantly Europe.
Okay.
And I went on a camper van trip last summer to do this, just me and my partner Millie, and we went back to Borneo Sporenberg. So I hadn't been there for, I'm showing my age, but 20 years. And the reason that it's on the list today is because that had matured in a way that had made it 10 times better
than when you saw it the first time.
Yes. Wow. And that's rare. And I know certainly from listening to your podcast that there's a lot of criticism about how places look after 10 years, never mind 20 years. Borneo Sporenberg was thriving. It had a really clear purpose in terms of what the place was doing. But when I did some more research into it, I think what was super interesting was the tenure, and that it was combining private, rented, as well as social housing seamlessly. And the place looked after. It didn't feel too polished. It just felt looked after and cared about. And on almost every street, there was somebody doing a small amount of responsible upkeep of their home in a way that made it feel super special. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that is actually the second time that Borneo Sporenberg has been mentioned on the podcast. Nuala Gallagher from Liverpool City Council also mentioned it, and she said that what she liked about it, and sort of the Dutch way of doing things, because they're often held up, along with the Scandinavians, as sort of being exemplar in how they do things in terms of the built environment. She said that willingness to experiment is crucial. And she said that in the UK, perhaps we don't have the same kind of leeway to fail, is what she said. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's a fair reflection, yes. On the flip side of that, one of our leading principals, we've got an in-house design team who interestingly is headed up by our design principal, Simon, who was my tutor at university when I went on this tour, who has come back and has been with Citu now for 5 years. I think one of our leading principles in our in situ design is that we break the rules to positively remake them. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is that I think over the course of, I'll say 50 to 100 years, I think people's desire and almost their belief that they're not entitled to great, interesting, fun places, whether that's the buildings or the spaces between the buildings, has dwindled so much that I think people don't have the expectation, so therefore they don't actually know that they want it until you deliver it. And the Climate Innovation District where I was sat and Borneo are two great examples of that. If you were to ask 1,000 people to design a place, you're not going to get a Borneo Sporenberg. And I think it's our responsibility as developers, designers, to really push the boundaries, break those rules to remake them. And there are countless examples where, not just here in Leeds, but across all our developments, where we've done things that perhaps some of the departments have said, no, that you're not allowed to do that. And we've done it and proven it's okay. And now they're used as examples in their guides and policies of great examples. So I think on paper, yes, we're not encouraged to take those risks. I think we should.
It's incumbent on the industry to do that, to innovate.
I think we should. I think there's one of the things I always say is that we're in a climate emergency, and alongside that we've got a housing crisis. So we've got all these different things. Well, we can either dwell on that, or we can take a level of responsibility to say, and I always do say this, I think we're the last generation that can have quite a lot of fun fixing a lot of those problems. If we're not careful, we'll pass on to the next generation who won't have the ability to have as much fun. So part of that fun is about being creative, is about challenging what's being put in front of us. Because I think there's not enough challenge to say, well, is that right? And if it isn't right, how can we make it better?
Yeah. I mean, you seem like quite a calm, measured person, but I can imagine with the sort of the outlook you have on the industry, that you must spend quite a lot of time frustrated by what you see coming forward. Is that fair?
I feel scared by some of the developments that you see being delivered that are called brand new. I feel scared about how they are responding to the planetary requirements for the future. I think as a business, we've taken a really clear mantra, which is to always be trying to be the solution. We don't run around shouting, we run around doing it and creating that ripple effect. And there's lots of things that we could all get frustrated about and say, well, you can do it, but actually there's nothing better than when you bring some of the naysayers or people who simply don't understand that you can do this stuff around our developments and show them that actually you can do it and give them the confidence to move forward productively and positively. We're the first developer to have joined the Humanise campaign, which was off the back of the Humanise book from Tom's Heatherwick Studios. And that's about the principles of the pandemic around the fact that we're creating a future of boring, whether that's in the buildings or the materials or all those little details from our city perspective of development to the street perspective to the doorstep. And the reason we joined the campaign is because that is a pandemic. We've got to make things more interesting, and we believe that by being part of that, we can again elevate the solutions rather than get really cross about the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Right, moving on to our third scheme. So this is the dream scheme. So if money was no object, what project would you dedicate your time to? You can kind of be as outlandish as you want here, and sort of dream big. So what is your dream scheme, Jonathan?
So I think when sort of discussing this in terms of the brief for today, I think one of the remarks was if money was no object, and it's again a narrative we get brought into quite a lot. But people assume that by creating the places like the Climate Innovation District, for example, that cost more money. Well, it doesn't. It just requires a lot more thinking and time. And so when coming to answer this, straight away, it was really clear. I did a piece of work 25 years ago, maybe 22 years ago, so I'm probably being unfair, in a place called New Yundum in Gambia.
Okay.
And
this is the first time we've gone to Africa for our dream scheme.
Fabulous.
Excited for this.
Good. Well, I'm happy to have brought Africa into this. It was a small project that I was doing with a development trust based in Hull, and they were doing a coupling up with a similar scale community of 5,000 people in the Thornton estate in Hull. Amazing place that I spent a lot of time doing a lot of really important work with early on in my career. And New Yundum, a 5,000 person development. I went and lived there and designed a market between two 5,000 person communities. It was the most important journey project of my career. I'll remember it for the rest of my life because it taught me the value of design that isn't completely intrinsically linked to one of the biggest excuses that we have in development, I believe, which is about it costs more. Okay. Did a very modest structure, created a very probably uninspiring architecturally market that sat between these two, but the impact that created was massive. That brought together two challenging communities, and it made it bigger, and it meant that they could share, and it meant that they were interacting with their neighbour that they'd never interacted with before at a community scale.
So you're bringing them together.
Yeah, and so when talking about a dream scheme, I think expanding on that and in terms of looking at where some of those challenges are faced globally, but if I was to use New Yundum as an example, it would be to take the next levels of amenity into there. And I'm fascinated by Africa. Actually, I went there last year for my 40th birthday, and I just kept having to stop the vehicle we were in because there's a level of absolute simplicity in some of these communities that we can learn a huge amount from.
Give me an example.
I think we talk about circular economy. For an example, I spent an afternoon when I was in Zanzibar speaking to some of the people within this community, and all those aspects that we have a habit of putting into big unwieldy PDFs around 15-minute neighbourhoods and cities. Actually, if you simplify it, it's about making sure that you've got your family and friends on your doorstep. It's making sure that you've got the amenities, and it's making sure you've got something to contribute now. And I think they're the things that I take away from that. Those things that they're contributing are usually goods, and they share and contribute goods to one another. And the overarching and the thing I'll remember forever is that there was some serious challenges in Gambia, if I was to go right back. But I left a community there that had children that were playing out in the street that day to day were much more happy than when you see some of the examples. Well, we don't see children playing in the streets anymore. We do here at the Climate Innovation Districts, and I love it. Yeah, because that's about creating that intervention. So by spending time looking at some of those simple principles and the basic needs of what great communities need, I think we can take a lot of that and bring it back and work out how we do things here in the UK on all our districts. One of our future ones in Attercliffe in Sheffield that we're working on at the moment, I've listed out all those learnings from my recent trip to the design team to say this is where we start, and then we build up, rather than starting at the top with everything that's everything that's possible and working our way back down through what we call in this industry, the ugly word of value engineering.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And you've mentioned obviously multiple trips to Africa, going to see places in Europe to see what good looks like, I guess. Do you think the industry and other developers do that enough?
Well, I think there's across the UK, I think there's some good examples of place. I think the unfortunate thing, but fortunate thing, is that if you go to Copenhagen, you walk into a great example of place, and you walk 5 minutes in the other direction, and you hit another amazing example of place. So I think we have a lot to learn. I think it heavily boils back to transportation. I think when you look at, if you put great transport networks in, and you remove cars as in terms of your psychology as well as physically, then you automatically start to create more interesting, better, wealthier places. But I think we have a lot to learn in terms of how we plan for the future. I think when you think about what we need to do from an environmental standpoint, both technically, through biodiversity, through resilience, unfortunately now, because we've got to plan for some of those challenges that we've already created. We need to be looking to the best examples, and we've got to be doing it quick. And I think the best examples are located across Europe. There's some of the best. I was in Malmo over Christmas looking at an example that they implemented in the year 2000, and it was revolutionary for its time. And I think if anyone was to go and look at that development, they'd see signs of that all over our places, because we've picked up those examples. And same with Borneos-Borenberg, as I mentioned earlier. If you were to go and look at that, you'd see some big similarities between what we've done, and we're really proud to have taken those examples. We're not scared to admit it, because they're excellent.
I would implore anyone who hasn't yet been, and with the UK Reef coming up, it's a big opportunity for anyone in the industry who wants to come and have a look around, to come and have a look around the Climate Innovation District. It is remarkable. And I want to ask a final question. So a lot of our listeners, as I mentioned earlier, are based in the Northwest. And is there any chance of Citu making its mark on the other side of the Pennines?
I'll leave football out of this as a staunch Leeds United fan. At the moment, when we set out on that vertically integrated journey, one of our leading principles that we need to get every single aspect of what we're doing to a level of excellence, and we're still very much on that journey. However, we're at an exciting point in that journey where things are that model is looking really good. We're really aware that to really deliver on our purpose around impacts, that is hand in hand with scale. But what we're absolutely never going to do and not going to do is do scale for the sake of scale. And last year we delivered 200 homes. This year we'll deliver 250 homes. We were very clear about 5 years ago that there's more than enough opportunity and need across Yorkshire for us to create a huge amount of impact. That's not saying that we never will. And as we all know in the development world, if you're looking at land, you need to say 4 years later, you might possibly be selling homes on that land. So never say never. Certainly the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, we think that we don't want to dilute what we're doing in a way where we lose touch.
Spread yourself too thin, yeah.
And also making sure that the culture and the people that are so absolutely important to delivering what we need to deliver, that doesn't get diluted as well. So for now, we're very, very proud and very happy to be Yorkshire centric, but never say never.
Fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for talking to us about your 3 schemes. And thank you very much for listening at home or wherever you are. Please do join us next time for another episode of the Scheming Podcast.